Keep it up. All right, so
Are you guys ready? Start.
Go ahead. Session.
Hi, I'm Sophie. This is my first year at DMI. My background, however, is in the fine arts, my true love being plein air painting. I, however, am here at DMI to study what I have come to call conceptual interaction design. I will be presenting 4 projects today. But before I talk about them, I'm going to share with you a little bit about where I was last semester. I ended last semester with The Perfect Human application, an updated response to a short film called The Perfect Human by Jorgen Leth, made in 1967. This application humorously aimed to quantify the human, turning us, through our mobile technologies, into a set of dynamic data, demoting our qualitative goals and more intimate experiences in favor of numerical statistics and high scores. I was inspired by Sherry Turkle, who in her book, Alone Together, makes this point. It used to be, I have a feeling, I want to make a call. And now it's, I want to have a feeling, I need to send a text. Turkle's point is that we used to reach out to each other for assistance and companionship in times of need or excitement. But today, we can't experience a feeling without sharing it with others. 2 weekends ago, I had the privilege of presenting this project at a symposium at MICA in Baltimore. Inspired by Turkle, one of the audience members asked a very intriguing question.
Is it the technology that has led to that difference, or is there something in the culture of human sentiment that has led to the technology?
The work I'm going to show you today does not answer this question. Instead, it aims to critically examine and recontextualize our relationships with new media technologies. However, this question, with its most likely unknowable answer, is at the root of these investigations. So, to begin, hello, can you hear me? This was a big data research assignment Brian gave us in our studio class. He asked us to create a story by mining big data. I found myself in corners of the internet, so dry, so full of numbers and charts, I never could have imagined them. But I ended up finding some very interesting data about cell phones, particularly the number of connected cell phones in the United States, which in 2011 surpassed the US population. This isn't particularly surprising, considering it is common for people to have one phone for work and one for personal use. But I started thinking about these numbers in a different way, that the number of connected or activated phones in this country is greater than the number of living humans. There are more of them than there are of us. So Hello, Can You Hear Me is an exploration of data that aims to answer the question, how do we use our cell phones anyway? First, we talk. Here's a graph of the minutes used from 2008 to 2012, steadily growing as expected. We text while having our morning coffee, while waiting online at the supermarket, even while lying in bed at night. Just in the past 4 years, that number has quadrupled, going from 600 trillion text messages to almost 2,400 trillion. Finally, we use data. Now that more than half of Americans own smartphones, we can use our data for all sorts of activities on the go. In just the past 3 years, US mobile data traffic has increased almost tenfold. So when we compare the rates of our growth, the slopes of these lines, we can see that data usage and our texting habits are growing much more rapidly than the number of talk minutes we are using. So maybe we aren't using our cell phones to talk with. Maybe we're using our cell phones for browsing and typing instead. I found some more interesting data about the length of time we are spending on our phone calls. Turns out in 2007, right before the iPhone was first released, we spent a lengthy average of over 3 minutes on each call. We must have been seduced by the potentials of our new touchscreens, because our average call time decreased to an all-time low in 2011, when we were spending 47% less time on each call. I started thinking about this 47%. What does it mean? It's not that we're being cut off halfway through our conversations. We aren't saying, I love, instead of, I love you. So we may be connected, just a quick SMS away, but if we don't actually call each other, we won't be able to hear each other's voices. And if we are spending less time making phone calls, could it mean we are spending less time actually listening? Listening is clearly an important skill. As data and texting become more popular, could that 47% actually be a loss of valuable practice time and space to hone those listening skills? The skill of listening, like the ability to observe or read, takes time, focus, and patience. And in return, we learn, we gain understanding. Most importantly, we learn how to hear ourselves. So this line of questioning has brought me to the mobile music box. So this project is inspired by a certain experience I know we can all relate to. Whether we're out at a restaurant or in a supermarket, maybe in the dressing room of TJ Maxx, we hear the familiar sounds of the cell phone ring. And I know my mother, when this happens, she looks up, oh, is that me? And frantically searches in her purse. Usually it's not even her phone. We can all agree our phones have become like shiny new appendages, an extra helping hand. But just like the itch of a phantom limb, the recognizable sounds and vibrations of our mobile phones seem to exert a power over us from our purses and pockets. But wait, aren't we supposed to be in charge? I mean, he is, but we are too. All right, so the mobile music box is an attempt to highlight the cell phone's presence in our lives, as well as to call attention to the power dynamics of that relationship. I've appropriated some of the most popular cell phone ringtones into this new context, this of the music box, so that we can transform these annoying noises by manipulating pitch and volume through the magic finger holes and reclaim or hear them anew, hopefully to be able to call it music. I want to introduce to you these key players, the ringtones, but before I do, I had a lot of fun with them. And I want to explain to you how I treated them. For seminar, we were reading Some Virtues of Design by Guy Bonseppe. After Italo Calvino's 6 Memos for the Next Millennium, Bonseppe outlines 6 qualities of design that he believes we need to carry forward with us into the future. What better way to strip these sounds of their annoying role than to turn them into virtues? Virtues to strive for with regards to our relationships with our cell phones. So I tried to treat each ringtone like a song, and I tried to align its formal musical qualities to what I felt were the most appropriate virtues. First, I mapped AT&T That's the longest one, I promise. I mapped it to lightness. When Bonseppe refers to lightness, he refers to the efficiency and elegance of a well-designed system. For our relationships with our cell phones, we need to remember that they should not wear us down, but lift us up. When they call to us, when our phones ring, let us be reminded they are singing our praises. Virtue 2 is intellectuality, which I mapped to Nokia. Here, Bonseppe talks about the importance of being critical, how progress has only come when innovators have had the courage to call into question the orthodoxies and conventions of the status quo. In terms of our relationships with our cell phones, I made the point that only through questioning have we gotten to a place of mobility. How far have we come from the clunky black boxes and the dragging tones of dial-up? Mobility is here, in our pockets and in our palms, always by our sides. Virtue 3, visuality, I mapped to T-Mobile. Bonsepe talks about this virtue of being visually or graphically literate. And here is my ode to the touchscreen. As we spend our evenings and days gazing into the reflective glass of our digital spaces, we are never left wanting. The soothing stream of brightness cradles our faces in the modern warmth of information and accessibility, as well as a timeless and universal display of affection. Virtue 4 is my virtue. This is the virtue of craft. And here I talk about the importance of the beauty of form, especially with regard to the iPhone. As it is perfectly formed for its function and has passed the test of diversity and time, climate and culture, how can we be sure we have found a symmetry and patterning that nature could only hope to mimic? So the user can play the magic finger holes by moving his or her fingers up or down over them. As the user approaches the box, the music he or she hears, which you will see momentarily in the video, is actually the slowed down ringtones, but it sounds magical and abstract. As the user closes the distance between him or herself and the finger holes, the sound plays faster and louder until it becomes the recognizable ringtone. So here it is.
That's really weird. It's gorgeous. You would never guess these were ringtones.
I want to very quickly explain to you how I did this. The photosensors collect raw data from the light cells, so it's light levels from the human interaction. That got sent to the Arduino. The Arduino turns that analog data into numbers, which sends these numbers through the USB port to pure data, which is where the code is written in, and that code manipulates those sounds. And then pure data sends those sounds out through the speakers. However, the real technical need here was this guy. This is Fred Wolflink, and I couldn't have done this without him. It really worked in my favor because he became very involved in the project. But I also have this new on-campus friend, and he's great. So really, the staff at MassArt has been really wonderful. So just wanted to say thank you now. Not that he's here, but. So with Fred's help, I was able to make a theremin-like music box, one that recontextualizes the familiar sounds of our technology, one that allows the user to develop a new, hopefully more virtuous relationship with the nagging cell phone ring. And this brings me to the weeping iPhone. When thinking about the power dynamics between me and my iPhone, I also began to think about the repercussions of technology on the relationships we have with others. So to go back to Turkle, as we expect more from technology, do we expect less from each other? I started thinking about how I expect my phone to be a great vessel or catalyst for connection, allowing me to text my grandfather in California daily or call my best friends whenever I need them. Also, though, this phone takes on a different role. When I call my best friend in tears or share an intimate moment with a loved one via text, my phone acts as a silent observer. And even when we disconnect or hang up, it's there long after. Could I someday expect it to take on the burdensome role of emotional reaction or expression to the intimacy it so readily enables? This prompted the question for my independent study with Gunther. If the digital could weep, what would it look like? I quickly replaced the abstract, the digital, with my iPhone. And I asked why. Why would my iPhone ever weep? Well, the iPhone would cry for the same reasons I would cry. So I started outlining why I cry. First, I cry because I get anxious. When I'm overwhelmed and frazzled and confused, I cry. Self-hatred. This is when the mean Sophie comes out, the angry, grumbling Sophie. This too causes me to cry. Depression. This is when I feel depressed or desperate, which I could describe as a deep, almost painful black cloud. And this too, I weep. Maybe my iPhone could feel these too. But how would my iPhone ever feel anything? Well, it would have to respond to me and my interactions with it. So, anxiety, or for the iPhone, I'm going to call it overwhelm disorder, this would be triggered by too much data. When I have too much coming in, too many updates I haven't used or done, and too many texts, and I'm sending out too many emails, this is when my phone would become like me during finals, overwhelmed and frazzled, indecisive, and confused. And this is the phone's response.
Maybe. Yeah. Maybe if, yeah, and no. Yeah, but, no. Maybe. Maybe.
Self-hatred, or for the iPhone, I would call it loser syndrome. This is the reverse. If I don't use my phone enough, if the little red circles that tell me how many unread voicemails I have grow higher, 10, 20, I have 30 unread texts, my phone would begin to feel neglected or abandoned, unloved and worthless, like a loser.
Loser. You are dumb. One big, fat, worthless loser. Why do you even bother to open your mouth? Nobody wants to hear what you have to say. You are so pathetic. You are probably the biggest, worthless waste of space and disappointment that has ever lived in the history of all time. You are nothing but one big, fat loser.
Finally, depression, or for the iPhone, state of despair. This happens when no one is interacting with me. So this is when I have more output than input. No one responds to my texts or my emails. My mom doesn't answer me when I call. The phone would become hopeless, isolated, helpless. It would fall apart. And here's its response. That's the loudest I've ever cried. This project brought me to some questions. Through having our phones express our emotions for us, could they help teach us to be more balanced, to be better in touch with our own feelings? How can we design our mobile technologies to encourage balance, self-awareness, reflection, to help us turn away from the virtual screen and enter into the world of the real? So Weeping iPhone takes me into my thesis, Content Blackout. How can we design digital places to encourage reflection? I'm going to begin by defining some terms. We're going to start with space, the unlimited or incalculably great three-dimensional realm or expanse in which all material objects are located and all events occur. So space is what allows change to happen. It also is what enables us to have a perspective. I've decided to call it space is where time happens. Place. Place has to be in space. It has to allow for change, be fluid, dynamic. It also has to allow for perspective. It has to be finite. It has to have the boundaries so that we can differentiate it from the place that it is and the place that it is not. It also has to be named. Like a location or address, we have to be able to call a place something. This can be the hill I used to go sledding on, or the field with the cows, or it could have a proper name, like France. Here's an example of physical place. in space, behind, not in the tower building. It's called Evans Way. But the girl in the park, seems disconnected from her surroundings. Her entire focus is centered around some other place in the phone or tablet in her hands. So based on my definition of place, the digital place is not the iPhone itself, nor is it the content that we're browsing, but rather the platform or interface that organizes that content. Here's an example of a place on my iPhone. It's called Facebook. I can scroll through its content. I can go to different pages and view its content from different perspectives. Here's a different place called iMessaging. I can click on the picture to make it better, or add a new line of text to make it longer. Here's another place called music, where I can not only listen to different types of music, but change the way I view that music. And here's another place called phone. Digital place is not reliant on data or interaction with others, but rather they all offer different interactions with differing data, and that data is signified by their names. The third term I'd like to define is reflection. This is the most vague of terms. Obviously, I am not talking just about serious thought or consideration, rather something more abstract. Let me try to describe this to you through a story. One Sunday last fall, Fish invited me on an impromptu visit to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. New to Boston, I didn't really know what to expect, and when I walked through the pathway into the central garden, I couldn't believe where I was. Outside the palace walls, there was traffic, business, schoolwork, but I had just traveled through a portal. Here was an elegant and cultivated oasis for the urban goings-on. Since then, I have gravitated to the museum, going most spare moments. While there, I have spent much time trying to understand why and how this place has had such a profound effect on me. One day, I stumbled on this Matisse. I had coveted this in books for years, and I didn't know it was at the Gardner. It was in a high, dark, and crowded corner of one of the first-floor galleries. Even though the knowledge that the Matisse lives just a few steps from my studio still thrills me, it struck me that I was not visiting the Gardner to admire the artwork. The museum offers something more. What is it about this place? I've spent hours tracing the arched windows and stonework up to the glass roof. I've witnessed the gray-white sky turn blue against the pink walls. Sitting in the space for even a short amount of time, one becomes aware of the running water. Its sound echoes throughout the building, breaking the concrete, bringing the elements of nature indoors. Here, the lush plant life awakens the Greco-Roman ruins, and in return, the ruins bring immortality to the fragile flowers. This is a place about the triumphs of humanity, our creativity, passion, and perseverance across the ages. Yet it is also about mortality. So, to quote Geoffrey Scott, architecture historian and friend of Edith Wharton, space is nothing, a mere negation of the solid, and thus we overlook it. But though we may overlook it, space affects us and can control our spirit. The architect models in space as a sculptor models in clay. I realize it is the space or the physical form of the Gardner that inspires reflection. The building, despite being filled with glorious artifacts, devotes its center, a large hollowed-out volume, to the traveling sunlight. The building pays tribute to the passage of the shining sun in all its symbolism. And this devotion of so much nothingness to the beauty and power of light and time invites me to devote my time to reflect on what I see around me, but also what it means to me. And this is where my thesis question comes from. How can we design digital places to encourage reflection? Could we hope that we could design digital places that, like the Gardner, slow us down and encourage presence of mind? So we have two different kinds of place, digital and physical. Because of our pervasive mobility, these offer an almost inevitable ubiquitous layer of digital architecture, which acts alongside the already existing physical on a third place, state of mind. And it is the form of these places that affects our state of mind, whether we are sad, overwhelmed, reflective. For both physical and digital places, form can be created by shape, line, and color. In physical place, the design, we refer to it as architecture or interior design, which has depth, so we have properties of volume, mass, and material. In digital place, we call the architecture interface or platform, and because it is flat, we don't have volume, but rather resolution or dots per inch. Form creates a flow. This is how we move through the space, how we enter or exit, where we rest, or where we move too quickly. In a physical place, we can refer to this as mobility. Do we bike, walk, run? Where are the stop signs, street lights? In a digital place, we refer to this as navigation. This refers to how the clickable links, buttons, and pages are organized in our digital landscape. Flow also references time. In the physical world, we have linear time tied to geography, which I call human time. And in our digital places, we have non-time, chronology and timestamps that exist outside of human time. The point is, however, that our state of mind, this third place, is acted upon by the form and flow, or the design of both the physical and digital places. So, can we design digital places, design that form and flow to encourage reflection? However, do we even want this from our digital places? Is this a sensible expectation to have? If this is a preposterous notion, how can technology be designed to help us turn away from the virtual screen and into the physical world of the real? Just as the mobile music box could help us reconsider the context of the familiar sounds of our devices and see them as music, or the weeping iPhone would force us to acknowledge our state of mind, could there actually be digital devices or places that encourage us to return to physical places of calm that enable awareness, focus? So here's my thesis, which I've just described to you, so I don't need to read it. The projects that I've shown you today, Hello, Can You Hear Me?, a mobile music box, and the Weeping iPhone, all aim to articulate the intricacies of our relationships with mobility. My goal is to bring these abstract aspects of humanity, which I believe the technology and mobility in all their glory may be jeopardizing, back to center stage. And when I visit places like the Gardener, I am reminded of the faith I have in humankind. I believe we will persevere. It's just a matter of a lot of critical and rigorous hard work. So thanks, everybody. And
So I have a question. Do you have an answer to your thesis already in your head, your project that fits the kind of space you're talking about?
no.
Not at all.
I know I don't have an idea of what I'm going to do. Yeah. Oh, I don't, that's okay, right? I'm still going to pass. I don't have an idea. I think I'm going to do some research on, apps that do meditation. That's not the direction I want to go, but I think I'm going to start with researching that direction and sort of see how I can, what I feel is missing from those, because that's the immediate, I think, response to that question. Does that answer it?
Yes.
Sorry.
But
Mhm.
I thought the flow of your talk was excellent.
Thank you.
Beautifully presented. And I guess in a way convincing that it leads to this thesis. I assume that you're also going to think about other places, physical places that have properties that you might want to employ.
Yeah, there needs to be a lot more research done what exactly is it in the physical place? What exactly is reflection?
You have, 2 or 3 decades experience in the world. Besides the garden, there must be some other places that are admirable.
Are you asking? Do you want me to tell?
Just 1 or 2.
I have a pier in Red Hook where I had a studio and painted. So that's sort of, I think, the real place. There was also, now I'm blinking. there's a lot of places. I guess that one just comes to mind. I think what you're picking up on is, I think there's a rhythm of the way the space is organized, and sort of that I've picked up on when I go out and paint, that has to do with sort of a big expanse that I'm interested in. So I've been often drawn to paint, big bodies of water or like large fields, and I think that's sort of what I'm trying to articulate. I think that's why that part of the museum and the gardener is really attractive to me. So does that answer it a little bit? Yeah. Does that make sense?
Well, first of all, I also agree. Like, your presentation was really clear and very nice to listen to. And you told a really nice story. And actually, I am in a way envious of your poetic analysis of the gardener, just because that's a piece that I also enjoy immensely, but I never can put it into words that nice. So I appreciate that. But in general, what I found very interesting is this idea that this, I guess, theme that goes on, that you're mapping some kind of like physical either categories or emotion to what are the digital translations of those things. So it happens with this idea of architecture to interface, and then it happens again with these things that you feel and how can you feel them through some kind of device and the virtues. So I found that very interesting. And I think to some degree, the music box for me is a more successful mapping of those things. And it does have this magical quality, but also when you listen to those tones, I never thought of them before as having these emotional qualities, but they do. So it's very, I guess, keen on your part for acknowledging those. The weeping iPhone for me gets a bit confusing, and I like the interpretations, and I love this idea of how can my phone somehow like tap into these emotions that I'm feeling by how I'm using it. But I think that the mapping starts to become a little bit obscure, and mostly in the middle one for me. So this idea of like the text messenger is it's not confusing, but okay, I'm not being used, and the text messages are growing, or your number of usage is growing on Facebook or whatever. That's the one that's confusing, just because the phone is still having this. Yeah. There's activity, so it's not neglected. So that's the one that seems absurd to me. But
no, that's a really good point.
But otherwise, I like that idea, and I wonder if there's other more subtle ways of having the device reacting to how you're using it.
Thank you.
I think there's a beautiful essay you presented here, and as an old man who is not living in digital space, I'm living still in the real space, and yes, I'm surrounded by all these iPhones, but I think that it's a real fundamental question of the model of life we select for ourselves. And I know that it's not my case, and I'm not with you in your research. I wish you well, but your presentation inspires me to ask this question: are we coming to the point when digital or real, we should ask about a model of life we would like to participate in. Is it a critical line when is order between virtual and real? Crossing it, we are changing model of life, and our options are very different that human experience used to be, at least in the way I experience it for my 77 years of life. It's very interesting, very inspiring questions you ask. I wish you to find answers. I don't have it. And I feel that it's a very risky, some maybe fascinating intellectually, but in consequences, a very dangerous era we as human beings will cross when answering these questions.
I'm curious, have you ever ventured into Second Life?
Yes, I have. For it was terrifying. I had a class that the professor was very much into Second Life, and we met for that class in my undergrad in Second Life. And I was the only student that showed up. She took me all around, showed me some museums.
Did you go to this Elizabeth Stewart Gardner in Second Life?
I mean, it seems like a comparable stab at creating a place that's digital, that has a navigation strategy, but that allows you to have a reflective space, but kind of an arid one.
I think that's the point.
How is what your path to different, except that you're doing it on a phone?
I think the point is that you aren't reflective in Second Life. I mean, it's a really disconnecting experience. It's a to be disembodied. I think, to be no longer physical. I think that's the issue that we sort of need to rectify, the disembodiment. But I found it upsetting. I mean, other people could have, I guess, very different experiences on Second Life. Clearly, it's got a big draw.
But it's inevitable if you're looking at digital space to be disembodied. To be disembodied.
Yes.
In your iPhone.
Yes. I mean, that's sort of where the second line of questioning comes in, I think. I sort of have, I see okay, so I think that reflection, I'm going to try to figure out how I can express it without having to tie it to the body. And I think for me, it's so much about being immersed, and I need to research and experiment and figure out how to break that. That's where I am now, but I see a lot.
Sorry, fish load.
Sorry.
Your thesis reminded me of this quote from Ellen Lupton, professor at Micah. Creativity thrives in two kinds of spaces: beautiful special spots removed from the ordinary, comfortable, familiar workspaces. So you described the Gardner that we went to. I have a lot of emotional attachment there. And then I thought of a comment you made in the studio of how it's important to have a space to just get in there and get to work. And that was something that I took away from you. And when I set up a space, I made it so forward. I made I need a place where I can get going immediately. But I also need to be around beauty. And when I don't want to be in there, I go to the Gardner, I go to the MFA. So I think you can glean a lot from just your neighborhood of school for the kinds of things that you're wanting. But I also think the thing that isn't in here is this notion of rationing, which you're kind of alluding to, rationing how much time you're spending in the digital space.
Quantity, yeah. Just to respond to that, I think that reflection, though like a very close cousin to creativity, they're two different things. I think that creativity is really fed by both of these spaces you're talking about. I think that for me, it's the process of making and the process of inspiration, though they tie together often, can be very separate. So, and that's something, in my studio practice, I've tried to understand. Oftentimes if you're painting outside, they come together really nicely. But sorry, that was a rationing. Quantity of time.
So I have so many things came to mind throughout the presentation, so that's a good sign. But the other thing is, so I think that we live in a disembodied life without these technologies. That there's a TED talk, I can't remember his name, it starts with Sir, where he talks about how we use our brains, our bodies actually, we use our bodies to just carry our brains from meeting to meeting. And we don't actually.
Yeah.
Oh. And so there's an example where, you might have a laptop or a tablet, but for the most part, we don't use our bodies for anything anymore. Certain people do, right? Certain people are more kinesthetic than the average Joe. But I think that that's an important thing to remember is that this embodiment doesn't just happen through digital interface. And that I bet that if you are going to explore an app, which I don't think is the right direction, but that interface needs to be not really too present, otherwise you'll come out of that immersion. If you want a reflective experience, it has to be just intuitive and it has to not be there, I guess, the interface. Although, I don't know, I guess that's part of the beauty of the museum is that the interface, which is your architecture, I guess, is beautiful and inspiring.
Yeah, but it's the nothingness. I think that's a good point, intuitive.
I wanted to ask, so just a couple of things. One is that I think people or what I'm hearing is that there's that you're making a decision on whether digital technology is helpful or harmful, and which side are we on? And I don't think, from my perception, that that's the point that you're trying to make. From my perception, the point is that we are involved in the digital world, and we're involved in the concrete architectural world. This is where we live, and this is the space we live in. And we can choose how we modify how we design these spaces to help us or hurt us. And you're asking these as questions now. You're posing these as questions. I would disagree that these digital spaces are disembodied. I am frustrated when I deal with my laptop all the time. And I consider those emotions as a part of my body. And so, therefore, there's a response, a physical response, by sweaty palms, sweat breaking out on my forehead, and I can feel my body when I have these interactions with my digital sources. So I think I'm very excited that this kind of discussion is happening during your presentation because it points to the emotive content behind these new relationships that can have value in the way that we use them and design for them. So I applaud your presentation.
Thank you.
I'd like to challenge you to think really deeply about the role of metaphor in interfaces, because this is the other half. Okay, in 1996 and 1997, we had a variety of interfaces in which these virtual activities were represented as real things. Okay, take a look at something like eWorld from Apple, or the Magic App operating system. Okay, and so we have slowly started to remove this level of skeuomorphism from our interfaces. And this is a battle that's happening right now inside of Apple. How the way in which our software speaks to us in relationships to the metaphors that we understand from the physical world. Okay? So it's not just about finding these two different places, it's about negotiating what is correct in the virtual world and how we relate to it. So I think that there's a great deal of sort of vocabulary you can build around that space as well. Not just evaluating what real spaces are, but what are virtual spaces, not necessarily mimic real physical space, but give us the properties that we need within that tougher context. It's a very different thing.
Yeah, I was just back to the second line thing. I think there's a certain experience or space that you were immersed in, but it sounds like from my, we're at sense of presence space, more relationship to space. So maybe
Yes.
explore immersion, presence.
Sorry. Just want to get my emergence and presence.
Immersion.
Immersion. Okay.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you.
Okay.